Welcome back everybody to When the Dutch Went to Space. We've arrived at episode number 19 called Glorious Failure. I'm not sure if failure is always that glorious, but we sure have a lot of it today. Starting off at the 24th of April in 1971, we have a Bobby spacecraft heading for Mars. Well, intended for Mars. It's not really heading in that direction. You see my graphic cards freaking out as the whole launch pad explodes. This is launch pad LC5B. In the background you can see LC5A, so we got an additional pad. But this has never happened before. And repair works on pad B apparently are well underway, but pad A is available to launch the backup, of course. Which is exactly the same craft. I have no idea what happened. No, I do have an idea what happened. So the wheels of the rover were actually protruding into the heat shield. And yeah, that causes some instability for the rocket, and then the whole thing just decides to explode. I'm not sure why the rocket tips over, but that's just the way KSP models things. Anyway, you can see Bobby E10 heading off to Mars. It's a completely new design. And it's using a quite heavy transfer stage, but we can use the Europa 2 to bring it not only to orbit, and you can see I'm speeding it up. That causes the blinking, speeding up the footage. But we'll bring it to orbit, and then we will use the remaining fuel to slingshot it towards Mars, where it will arrive in about 200 days from now. I think 270 days. The probe has a ton of RCS. It has 2 Gemini engines on the back, allowing us to do maneuvers midway. We'll need to do about 100 meters per second adjustment maneuver, but that's gonna be fine. 10th of May 1971, we have inclination changer, and the idea was that our rescue station is in a 28 degrees orbit around the moon. You may remember the gateway system. We never actually have used, we never ever even have visited the gateway system with our astronauts. It is just there as a safety precaution. And the idea is that whenever we get into problems on the surface, we can just go straight up, dock with the station, and we'll save. We have provisions for more than a month. We've got power, so this should be safe up there. However, I also reckon that these inclination changes are quite expensive, and so I figured, well, maybe we should move the station to a 0 degree inclination. That would make it always overhead, and would make sure we would always be able to reach the station. And I did some calculations, and I think we can do this with just the upper stage of Europa 2. Yeah, so I figured let's bring some new solar panels along. The old ones probably have been degraded quite a bit, and the newest ones are quite powerful. No, these are not the heavy ones that self-orient, but these are nice. You can, this footage has been sped up because I spent over an hour trying to get these two to dock. And I flipped around, used different docking ports, flipped stations around, tried to dock the station to the craft, tried to dock the craft to the station. But basically I lack thrusters in all 3 axes. No, basically you can't do a lateral movement, so you have to align them, push the spacecraft towards each other. But then, as all the space enthusiasts know, that once you speed up in an orbit, you actually raise it, and when you slow down, you lower it. And because the orbit around the moon is very low, small changes in altitude make up for big changes in delta V, and I gave up at some point. It was impossible to get them together. So yet another failure. 22 of May 1971, Haddock E15. Little heads up, this one will be alright, because this is number 15. Of course this one is okay. This is gonna work. We have Sally Ride back on our space program. And she's been with us before. She went to the moon, but now she's going towards the station. And you remember in the previous episode we brought a new supply ship designed by the Americans using the Cygnus spacecraft, giving us over a year of supplies. And that will turn out to be less than a year actually, but yeah, a little more on that later. Apparently we need 4 people up in the station to do the multi-week or multi-month duration study. So we're bringing up 2 crews. Sally Ride is one of them, and Wahid Jaega is the other scientist, our Indonesian friend. And we're docking them to the Nadir port. If you're a fan of the International Space Station, you may know that that's the Russian port. So the Russians will always dock on the Nadir, or mostly dock on the Nadir port. I'm not sure why they do it. I think that's just the way the system is aligned. But regardless, that is what we're going to do. I'm using the main thrusters here to kill some of that velocity before we start moving our starting our movement towards the Nadir port on Spacelab Alpha. So Sally Ride and Wayuda Eka will dock and transfer to the station for science. And they're actually going to stay there. The Haddock spacecraft will be used by Tokahiro, who is on the station, and he will return back to Earth. He is maybe he has completed his science project, and we need to do a bit of housekeeping. So we're getting rid of Jules Verne. It's filled with trash, and we've transferred all the goodies to the new support modules, and this one can go home. You can see another one is still docked to the central hub node. Regardless, this is where they go. And Tokahiro's returning home. He's taking the Haddock home. He's very experienced on this spacecraft. I think he's flown at least 6 missions with us. And so yeah, I'm not going to show you all the details of that particular missions, but it was nice to see that something finally turned out right. That is, I'm still suffering from power problems. I'm not sure what it is. We've got more than enough power, we've got more than enough battery, but if I speed up beyond I think 100 times regular speed, the station will run out of power. So we're actually progressing really slowly. 17th of June, we're launching this inclination changer 2, which is of course the second attempt to change the inclination of our space station around the moon. So a very similar launch profile, but this one has the magnificent addition of 4 additional thrusters, or maybe even 2, just 2. We just needed a little bit of thrust compensation on the top stage. But for the rest, it's identical to the one that we had to crash into the moon because it just was impossible to dock two together. There we go, great orbital insertion. There you can see the additional thrusters mounted to it. These are the, I think they're called the 4-port thrusters, which give you lots of power, which is what we are going to need if we're going to move all that hydrogen and liquid oxygen around to connect it to the station. And we arrive at the moon, about 4 days trip. I'll light up those engines, and you can see we already have to make a bit of an inclination adjustment in order to meet up with the stations. We always have to make some kind of an inclination turn, even to just catch up with it. Now imagine being on the surface and a couple of days pass and you actually shift your orbit. As we meet up with the station, we notice that 2 of the solar panels actually have stopped working, so it's a good thing we're bringing in new panels then. And docking is now a breeze. We just align them, and here we go. New power to the station, and we are getting ready for our inclination change. And we're gonna put the station at exactly the lunar equator. And you may not notice, but the moon is actually tilted with respect to the Earth by 28 degrees. So now we have our new station with lots of power at a 0 degree, making it easier for us to reach it should we need to. And final mission of this episode is going to be Luna 5. And we are bringing Valentina Tereskova. And she was the first woman in space, and she flew with us on Salyut 1 when we docked it to the earlier version of our space station. But ever since Salyut 1, we've lost Salyut 1 due to a fire in the previous episode. And maybe we feel guilty. No, I don't think we feel guilty. But we want to bring the Soviets along to the moon as well. Remember, the Americans have been there together with us, and we've been given a ride on Apollo 13 in a similar fashion, so doing lunar orbit whilst the Americans went down and safeguarding their return capsule basically, and that's exactly what Valentina is now going to do for us. And presumably the Russians have also been able to land on the moon, and this is an exchange program, so I presume that we are also doing a similar session with them. Here's another failure for you. The center engine forgot to ignite or refused to ignite, and as I was recording, I was afraid to go back in there and attempt to reignite it or relight it. The two side engines have more than enough for us to get this done, and I just loved the sunset. Look at that. It is amazing. So the engines on this craft are still the HZ20 engines, which are speculative United Kingdom engines. Hydrolox engines, very powerful. 4 days later we are at the moon, and this time all 3 of them light up. So let's hope that this is the last failure that we are going to have. And I didn't tell you about the mission commander. Helmut Schultz is on his first or second mission, I forgot. Maybe he went to the station. And we've got a bit of problem with the thrusters, but once we enabled cross fueling, it actually works. And we've got them docked together. Helmut transfers to the Luna lander and then leaves Valentina in the main craft behind. Now, the Luna 5 transfer stage has still got maybe 600 meters per second of fuel left. Somewhere between 300 and 600, depending on how much of an inclination change we had to do. And so we burn off all that fuel before we actually start using the lander, giving it tons and tons of reserve. And remember the last time on Luna 4 we were carrying a rover and we were carrying a support package. You can see the TLI stench dropping in the background. I don't think we see an explosion or impact. But last time we brought a rover and a support package, making the lander quite heavy, and this was mandatory, and we barely made it back. So this time we're not bringing a rover or a supplies support package. So Helmut is not going to stay on the moon lunar surface for 3 days. He's just going to spend about a day there. That's quite well possible with our the fuel reserves and the power reserves that we have in here. And he didn't bring a rover, but that doesn't mean he's not gonna roam the environment. So what you saw driving up there was Bobby D7, and I think it went back to the moon in episode 16 or 17. And it has been driving around ever since, and you can see Helmut collecting the ground samples, because this rover has been to places, and it's just a way more powerful rover. It's got lots of energy in there, it's got science instruments, it's got better wheels. Look at him flying across the surface, and he makes about a 10-kilometer trip to different areas. He landed in one of the mares, so it is really flat. It's a volcanic area, and because of all the volcanic topsoil, it is a very flat area, but he's there to pick up strange meteorite rocks, and you can still see the landing tanks on there. This design had landing tanks integrated. He's grabbing another sample, because why not? Transferring all the data to his onboard computer system, and leaving the rover to ground control, who's undoubtedly gonna move it around to a better place. And then spend some time figuring out the correct heading to launch into, and truth to be told, I quick saved and had to do a couple of attempts before I figured this out. I never know the exact heading I need to pick in order to line up with my orbit. I always need a couple of tries to get it right, because, well, maybe I don't understand the math. Regardless, once you know the correct heading, it is really easy to get in an orbit that more or less aligns with Haddock's trajectory. They connect, transfer the samples, and burn for home in their trusted spacecraft. I love this shot. I love this spacecraft. It is so simple and light compared to what will come in the next generation. And it can do everything that you need to do. And here we are back. Its heat shield is limited, so we do a 2-pass re-entry. We pass once at 70 kilometers and then the orbit is brought down more than enough for us to actually go down there. And yeah, that's it. This is episode 19. Lots and lots of things went wrong, and I do hope that things will improve for us next episode, where we are slowly moving towards our new infrastructure. But until then, I hope you enjoyed. If you like it, subscribe. If you want to know why the Dutch would be able to go to space, I urge you to go start at the beginning of the series. And yeah, hope to see you next time.